Bismillah, Assalamu alaikum. In today's video, I'll be refuting orientalist on Ahadith preservation. Specifically, this is about a prophecy that is narrated by Imam Awzai. This hadith is in actually Sahih Muslim, so it's an authentic hadith that orientalists are claiming was fabricated by Imam Awzai. Let's get started. What's the contention? The prophecies in Ahadith are fulfilled only in the time of Prophet Muhammad only in the time basically before the compilation of Ahadith, not after the compilation of Ahadith. After the time of Prophet Muhammad no prophecies are after the time of basically compilation of Ahadith, no prophecies are fulfilled. The prophecies that were fulfilled before and were made into prophecies later. There is a hadith in Sahih Muslim of which a lot of the chains go through Imam Awzai. The events described in the hadith mirror somewhat the events happening in the time of Imam Awzai. They seem to be a part of group that Imam Awzai and the Sunnis opposed. Hence, Imam Awzai fabricated this hadith. The criterion of dissimilarity shows that this hadith does not go back to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Imam Awzai is an extremely reliable hadith transmitter. If he is unreliable, all hadith transmitters by extension are unreliable. Now, the hadith is basically Sahih Muslim 2944 that the Dajjal would be followed by 70,000 Jews of Isfahan wearing Persian shawls. This is about the Antichrist who is supposed to come at the end of time. Now, what are the events this prophecy is supposedly related to, right? And the events for which this prophecy was supposedly made up. There was a Jewish rebellion in Isfahan in the 8th century called Isaviya. Their leader claimed to be a Masih, a Messiah, uh, the Dajjal. The Dajjal is Al Masih at Dajjal. So, because the leader claimed to be a Messiah, he is supposedly linked to the Dajjal, right? Their people wore shawls mentioned in the Hadith. Although this movement was primarily in Isfahan, a few remnants of the rebellion lingered on in Syria where Imam Awzai was. So Imam Awzai fabricated this hadith to deal with that movement. What are the problems with this contention? There are basically 5 problems here. The entire part about prophecies is this clown simply lying. Imam Awzai is not the only one who narrates this hadith. The events that the hadith describes, and these events, right, the events for which the hadith was supposedly fabricated are different in a very crucial way. The criterion of dissimilarity cannot hope to be applied in the cases of isnads. Is there anything about Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam making this implausible about Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam making this prophecy? These are the 5 problems with this contention. Firstly, the point about prophecies, right? I think this is one of the most shameless and pathetic claims I have heard from Orientalists. Yet, anyone who knows anything about the Ahadith knows about the massive amount of prophecies that have been fulfilled recently. I have made detailed videos on this topic before, and I have basically these prophecies that were fulfilled after the Hadiths were compiled are actually a massive proof for Hadith preservation. So I have a video on this topic. So I won't go into detail here, but this most of you already know this is a clear-cut example of Orientalist clowns lying. Now I've mentioned 2 prophecies here. There are numerous others, but I just linked them to make my point clear. But the point about prophecies, I link the video where I make my argument for Hadith preservation from prophecies in the video description. I think this is the most clear-cut example of dishonesty and shamelessness of Orientalists in their lies. Now, as for the criterion of dissimilarity, right? This can't be applied in matters of isnad, and there is a problem with basically this Orientalist contention. This is actually quite stupid. Firstly, what is the criterion of dissimilarity? This is basically that if a person is mentioning something that is against uh, his beliefs, right? Then it is unlikely that person would have fabricated that, which means that transmission is authentic. And There are examples I can go into why this criterion cannot be applied to matters of isnad, right? Uh, I'll just go into one example. There's a hadith, man kazaba alayya hadith. This is a mutawatir hadith that is mentioned in Imam Shafi's works and in the works of his student Imam al-Humaydi. Now, in the later work, the student of Imam Shafi mentioned this hadith with only one defective isnad. Imam Shafi mentions this hadith with four authentic isnads. So, just because the Imam student of Imam Shafi is mentioning a defective isnad doesn't mean authentic isnads of this hadith did not exist at an earlier time. We know they did because uh, in his teacher Imam Shafi's work there are four authentic isnads. There are other example as well, but I'll I won't go into that because I don't need to, because there's a bigger conceptual problem here. The criterion of dissimilarity, basically the claim is that Imam Awzai fabricated this hadith, right? If he is fabricating this hadith, why would he attribute it to Hazrat Anas Raziyallahu anhu? Why wouldn't he attribute it to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? The criterion of dissimilarity is being basically used here to show that this hadith is not attributed to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Problem is, if this hadith is being fabricated, it would have to be attributed to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So this criterion of dissimilarity claim was just it's just pathetic on so many levels. It's impressive actually. Third point is that the chains mainly go through Imam Awzai. A lot of the chains go through Imam Awzai. That's correct, but all chains don't go through Imam Awzai. This hadith is narrated in not Imam Awzai is in Syria, right? But this hadith is narrated not just in Syria. They are Kufan isnads, Basran isnads, and Madinan isnads. There is basically a Yemeni scholar who narrates this hadith, but this has Madani isnads from Medina, not from Yemen. But this hadith is being narrated in different regions. Right now, the Orientalist claim is that none of these particular isnads are uncorporated. So what? The fact that these isnads, even if they are uncorroborated, exist in different regions, right? Distant regions shows that the hadith exists in different regions. So it is extremely unlikely that Imam Awzai, scholars in Kufa, Basra, and Medina were engaged in a mass conspiracy making up this hadith. So you can't say this hadith only goes back to Imam Awzai because it's in entirely different regions. Even if those particular isnads are uncorroborated, the fact that the same hadith exists in such different regions shows that it goes back to earlier common source. So, I mean, is there a mass conspiracy here between scholars in different regions? I mean, that claim just doesn't make sense. Now, the basically, now I'll get into what is the reason this fabrication theory fails. And this is actually quite funny, and it shows that this hadith, if it was fabricated to deal with the Jews of the time of Imam Awzai, couldn't possibly deal with those Jews. This hadith, because reading this hadith, it cannot be about those Jews. Basically, Imam Awzai, the hadith is that the Dajjal, the Antichrist that is supposed to appear at the end of time, would be followed by 70,000 Jews, right? So this is talking about an event, about a specific person that is supposed to come at the end of time, who would be followed by these Jews. These Jews were not the followers of the Dajjal. The Dajjal didn't arrive at that time. Before the Dajjal comes, a lot of major signs and minor signs are supposed to take place. Because this is an end time event that is supposed to be followed by specific events, this hadith, if you take it as it is, cannot possibly be about the Jews of Imam Awzai's time. So he wouldn't have made this hadith up to deal with those Jews, because this hadith cannot hope to deal with those Jews, because this hadith is about the Dajjal, who's among the basically whose appearance is among the 10 major signs, right? This is an extreme end time event. It cannot possibly refer to an event in the time of Imam Awzai. So the fabrication claim does not make sense for the very simple reason: this hadith cannot possibly apply to the Jews of Imam Awzai's time, because it's talking about a very specific end time event that did not take place at the time, that wasn't expected to take place at the time. Imam Awzai could not have thought that this event would take place then, because a lot of other major signs would have to take place before it. He wouldn't make this claim up. No one would make this claim up to deal with those Jews, because the fact that the Jews mentioned in the Hadith are followers of the Dajjal, the Antichrist, disqualifies the Jews of Imam Awzai's time to be basically mentioned in this Hadith. This Hadith cannot hope to be applied to the Jews of Imam Awzai's time. So it doesn't make sense that he would fabricate this Hadith to deal with those Jews, right? And if Imam Awzai was making a Hadith up to deal with those Jews, right, the Jews of his time, this Hadith should have been similar to other Ahadiths that deal with people, regarding people basically before the time of compilation of Ahadith, like the Hadith that prophesizes about Al-Hajjaj, Hajjaj bin Yusuf and Mukhtar ibn Abi Ubaid. And I'll link that Hadith, the article where the Hadith is, in the video description. This is just this is the Hadith about major signs, 10 major signs that are supposed to happen uh, bef- before the end of time, right? And again, these are extremely end time signs, and you can see that these are supposed to happen just before the end of time. The jar is supposed to come before the end of time, at the very end, right? And before him, a lot of major and minor signs are to take place. If Imam Awzai was making this hadith up to deal with Jews of his time, right, he wouldn't make such a blunder by setting the events of the hadith centuries later. I mean, these Orientalists try to be clever, right? But their claims are like just pathetic. I mean, I don't know what to say here. The last part is there anything plausible about this prophecy being made by Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? No. Firstly, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was a prophet. He was supposed to make prophecies, right? Jews in Islam are known to have worked against the true Messiah, Isa al-Islam. So why wouldn't they ally with the false Messiah according to Islam? There's nothing unusual about this. More than that, Jews were known to be Isfahan in the time of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, wearing those shawls. So there is nothing even anachronistic about Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam making this prophecy, even from a secular perspective. And I mean, seriously, I don't know what to say. To be honest, uh, the clown who wrote the article, right, that I am refuting, is supposed to be one of the expert Orientalists regarding hadith, but this is just pathetic, right? If these are their experts, I don't think Muslims need to ever worry regarding Orientalists. Inshallah, I hope you have enjoyed this video regarding reliability of Imam Awzai. Till next time, Assalamu alaikum.